Hello, how are you all doing? So, in the last message, we read True Mother's words given at the ceremony to offer our resolve to complete the Chonwongung. And after that, there was a banquet. Mother shared some deeper words, and of course, there was a workshop. But the next public speech was at the 30th anniversary to celebrate the founding of the Women's Federation for World Peace. And we're going to read that today. Some of the other stuff we're going to be getting to later. And yet this speech that was delivered publicly still touches, and I believe sort of continues a theme that Mother is expressing to us, and entirely harmonious with everything else that we studied together in Korea. So let's read this together. This is Mother's speech given to honor the 30th anniversary of the founding of WFWP on April 21, 2022, and this was delivered at the Chongshim Peace World Center, otherwise known as the HJ Global Arts Center. Let's just dive in and reflect together. Dear leaders and Women's Federation members, both at home and abroad, how long has it been? Is it 3 years? I'm so happy to see you. Since the fall, human history has been dominated by men and marked by conflict and war. Especially in medieval Christian Europe, the status of women was not visible. Yet, when nations faced a crisis, it was the women who stood at the forefront. Especially following the death of Jesus, the people of Israel, as a people without a nation, wandered for 2,000 years. However, Israeli women and mothers continued the traditions of Judaism in their homes, enabling Israel to become what it is today. So, in this opening paragraph, against the backdrop of human history that has been marked by war and conflict, and isn't that the case? You know, when you study history, often it is to do with the history of warfare between nations, land grabbing, certain kings and leaders and what they did. But really a history, a timeline guided by, recorded by men. And then Mother's mentioning how, especially in medieval Europe, the status of women was not visible. And we may overlook the role that women have played in the nation of Israel. But to say that the status is not visible does not mean that there is no status or that it doesn't exist. Is that it's hidden. This hidden power of our mothers, sisters, wives, and daughters throughout human history, especially in times of conflict and challenge. I don't think Mother's just offering flowery words to make the sisters feel good, but really she's pointing out what a central role women play, especially at times of conflict, which is all of human history. That actually women are very much on the front line and maintaining the traditions in the home. Let us continue. At this time, when we are working to firmly establish Chonilguk on True Parents' victorious foundation, the role of women is quite important. Women must take the lead and teach others about Heavenly Parent. The only way for fallen humanity to return to the embrace of the Heavenly Parent, our Creator, is through true parents. Therefore, you who have received the blessing need to teach all of fallen humankind, from your families to your tribes, nations, and the whole world, so that all fallen people can rise to the position where they can gain the qualifications to attend our Heavenly Parent. Do you understand what I mean? So essentially, Mother here is emphasizing the role that women need to play today, to take the lead and to teach the world about our Heavenly Parent. It's fascinating to me. I've been thinking a lot about how Father taught us. Father really dedicated years and years of his life seeking to uncover the true identity of evil, of Satan, and how to how to use indemnity to speed up the providence. There was always a fight, a restorational course, right? It's interesting, even in the last 10 years, I can't remember the last time Mother has referenced Cain and Abel, for example. She's referenced Joshua and Caleb. And more than defeating Satan, Mother's really focused on teaching about Heavenly Parent. There's sort of an attractive quality to the way Mother educates us. She's not really pushing us, although she is pushing and encouraging us, but there's sort of this magnetic, attractive quality to the way True Mother speaks. I compare it to the aroma that comes from the kitchen in your traditional sort of family environment. If the mother of the family is cooking in the kitchen, there's this aroma that comes, this familiar aroma that comes from your mother's food that pulls you in to the table, pulls you to the dining table. And I often liken the way Mother teaches like that. And the reason I mention this is because Mother's talking about how women need to take the lead. And of course, this doesn't mean men are taking a back seat, but I believe that the way we are embracing the world, the way we are seeking to elevate the consciousness of the people of the world is now much like a mother attracting the people back home, back to the dining, back to the banquet table with the aroma of that familiar aroma of only the food that your mother can cook. And so I mention it because it's not just thinking lightly, oh, women have to work hard to teach everyone. There's a different quality to the era that we are in, and there's a different sort of style with which Mother is leading us to teach people, So especially those who have received the blessing need to teach all of humankind, she says, from your tribes, from your families to the whole world. But it's really teaching about Heavenly Parent. Mother is constantly beckoning us to think about and relate to and work towards the environment where everyone is relating freely, comfortably, and warmly with our Heavenly Parent in heaven. Okay, let us continue. Then Mother says, doing volunteer work is good. It is what we have been doing until now. There are more than 200 nations on this earth with many problems. Nevertheless, we also need to let them know the essence with which they were born and help them to realize that the only way for them to be blessed is to become our Heavenly Parent's children through true parents. Okay, so doing volunteer work is good. So, in terms of Women's Federation for World Peace, I think that in most nations there are a lot of efforts to do service, volunteer work, which is beautiful. And Mother's saying it's great. There's more than enough volunteer work to go around. There's so many problems around the world in over 200 nations. Nevertheless, Mother says, we got to get to the essence. We have to teach humanity the essence of who we are born to be. We're essentially talking about humanity's birthright. Because no matter how many problems we fix, for every problem we fix, we're creating 3 more in the meantime, or 10 more. In the meantime, if we continue to live in this world, if we continue to live on this planet without truly knowing who we are and knowing what our purpose is. It's a beautiful purpose. But there's no happiness and there's no peace and there's no true problem solving without uncovering that essence. So Mother's simply saying, look, service work is great, but ladies, we have to talk straight too. We have to talk straight and teach with love about our Heavenly Parent. Okay. In particular, Mother says, as this Korean peninsula, this nation that is meant to become our Heavenly Parent's homeland, walks the path to becoming a heavenly unified Korea. True parents' efforts, as well as your own, are required. So, especially the nation of Korea, which should become Heavenly Parent's homeland, true parents' efforts and our efforts are sincerely required. However, its people, meaning the Korean people, need to know the truth of the providence, the essence of the Creator and the purpose for which they were born. We must make them aware that the people are not worthless beings motivated only by self-gratification. Okay. So Mother's talking, especially the Korean people, need to know the truth of the providence. Now, what was the title of the workshop that the leaders were in Korea to attend? It was about the truth of the providence. The truth of the providence. And again, Mother's using these same words. We need to know the truth of the providence. Especially the Korean people must know the truth of the providence. Now, keep in mind, it's easy to hear those words and just think because we're in the movement we know what that means. But remember, she's delivering this speech on the third day, actually, of our 3-day workshop, titled, with the lectures titled, The Truth of the Providence. So she was telling us as leaders that we need to know the truth of the providence before we can teach it. That means the providence that we've been teaching until now, or our awareness needs to be deepened. Our awareness needs to be deepened. And Mother's conveying this in a parallel sense, talking about the Korean people. So all of what we were in Korea to inherit needs to be revealed and needs to be shared, especially with the Korean people. And we must make them aware that people are not worthless beings motivated only by self-gratification. So, there's this saying, oh, we're only human, as if to indicate that, of course, humans are flawed. Of course we have issues. Well, yes, of course we do, but it's not supposed to be that way. We don't have to live that way. We don't have to be worthless beings only interested in our own benefit. And, perhaps there's too many people alive today that have just given up and given in to that concept. Because if you give in to that concept, well, then you can just do whatever you want. Everybody's selfish, so just do what you want. So Mother really wants us to be people who can live for the sake of others, especially the Korean people. Mother wants to educate. We are presently working to establish an environment where we can attend Heavenly Parent on earth. In particular, this people, this nation to which God's only begotten daughter was born for the first time after 6,000 years, must not remain as two countries, but become one. To this end, it is critical to educate the people not only about God's providence, but about the truth of history as well, so that each can stand in the position to fulfill his or her responsibilities. In this, the role of women is particularly important. Okay, so I really want everybody just to keep in mind, Mother's not just talking about women because it's a women's federation event, right? It's central content and it's relevant to all of humanity. Okay? Yes, she's sort of instructing Women's Federation leaders, also giving them, in a sense, sort of she's vision casting for the mission that lays ahead. But it's not this talk about understanding the role of women. It's not just because it's a Women's Federation event. Again, I can see what Mother's, in relationship to everything else that we received in Korea, I can feel coming out of these words that Mother is specifically talking about our need to understand providential history and understand the role of women and the importance and the centrality and the meaning of the fact that God's only begotten daughter was born in Korea, and to understand what that means. So let us continue. A mother's role does not end when she gives birth to a baby after carrying it for 10 months. Mothers continue to protect their babies and keep an eye on them constantly to ensure they grow up well and healthy. Mothers' devotion and effort are necessary until their children are capable of making decisions on their own and discerning right from wrong. The Korean people, in particular, must understand this in order to fulfill their responsibilities as God's chosen people. When you look back in history, they have been a pitiable people. Foreign powers have invaded them numerous times. Though they also had their times of glory, they ultimately settled on the Korean peninsula because they disliked war. Yet, they have had to endure indescribable suffering during the course to complete heaven's great providence, which was carried out through the Korean people. Thanks to God's protection, however, the true parents and ancestors of humanity, long awaited by heaven, who can give new life to all humanity as God's children, were born among the Korean people. What would have happened if the providence of the only begotten daughter had begun in earnest at the time of their advent? Okay, there's a lot in here and I can't get to it all, but just this last line of this paragraph itself really encapsulates everything, because Mother again is almost, you can say, she's constantly educating us. She's not complaining, but there is a sort of heavenly lament. She feels sorry to heavenly parents. She feels sorry to heaven. She feels sorry to humanity. Because had we, especially had the Korean people, understood the providence of the only begotten daughter at the advent of true parents, which means in 1960, Mother's asking what would have happened, right? Remember, I've mentioned now several times this incredible sentence that Mother mentioned in February. Had the truth been revealed, properly revealed or fully revealed about the only begotten daughter 60 years ago, then Christianity wouldn't have opposed us. I mean, wow. It's the same thing she's saying. She's sort of poking at the same thing from another angle. But she's clearly asking us to understand. If it's not just about Christianity opposing us or not, okay? Fundamentally, there's something fundamental that we have not understood. Now, it's not just because it's a Women's Fed event. It's not just because Mother's been leading the last 10 years. But even 60 years ago, 62 years ago, there was a fundamental understanding that evaded us. You know, even 36 couples, members of the 36 couple blessing group, came to ask certain elders at IHQ, about this only begotten daughter thing, because they'd never heard, they didn't, there was many that didn't, and still today struggle to understand what that means. And we've never heard this before, and what does it mean? But actually, Father mentioned it many, many, many times. Even before the Holy Wedding, Father mentioned it. But you can say that it was never truly emphasized. Perhaps you can say it wasn't adequately emphasized. Certainly if our earliest members don't even ever remember hearing it, okay, then clearly it wasn't conveyed as a central, as a cornerstone of the providential age that we were in. So, this declaration of God's only begotten daughter did not start after Father passed. It started over 60 years ago, but it wasn't emphasized. And so what's been missing over the last 60 plus years? So you're understanding what I'm saying? Mother's talking about the Korean people. She's talking about how a mother's role doesn't end at birth. It doesn't end at conception. First of all, that 9 or 10 months is a lot of work. Thank you, sisters. But it doesn't end at birth either. And honestly, although Mother is talking about feeling responsible until the children can sort of take care of themselves, I think a mother's work is never done. And throughout their children's lives, the mothers are always looking out for their children, always concerned for their children. But in terms of responsibility to raise and educate, that first 20 years, mothers have incredible responsibility to carry forth the traditions, to carry forth the inheritance, really, of the lineage. Mother's devotions, mother's guidance, helping the children understand between right and wrong. This is now, in particular, what Mother wants the Korean people, God's chosen people, to understand. But it is impossible to do if they do not understand the significance of God's only begotten daughter. So, brothers, sisters, especially sisters, mothers, we need to teach directly about this. It means we need to understand it. The truth of the providence has not been understood, even to us, even to leaders. So surely to all of us, there's a lot to learn. And it shouldn't have been just this month, or this year, or the last decade. We should have known this over 60 years ago. So, Mother's talking about heaven's great providence that was set up and completed by the Korean people. But if they don't understand the fact that at the advent of true parents, God's only begotten daughter was there, then there's no way for the Korean people to cash in, to conclude, to celebrate all of the things that this incredible people went through, that they survived through, struggled through. It's not just for Samsung. It's not just for their great boat-making abilities. Or it's not just for the great culinary skills. That's not the purpose of this nation, Korea. And it's certainly not meant to be divided. If you really listen to what mothers say, you surely must come to the conclusion, the question in your prayer. Would Korea have even been divided if we understood the meaning of God's only begotten daughter 60 years ago? Pray about that. All right. Thanks to God's protection, however, the true parents and ancestors of humanity, long awaited by heaven, who can give birth. So, okay, I've read that. Let's continue. It is the true parents, the true mother, and only begotten daughter who can give rebirth to fallen people. Why is Mother saying this? It is the true parents, the true mother, and only begotten daughter who can give rebirth to fallen people. Well, it's the second reference to giving birth. Think of the role that men and women play to make babies, okay? So the role of the man's role is extremely important, but short-lived. I mean, of course, there's all of the fathering to do, but in terms of really making the baby and taking care of the baby, the mothers play a central role. And so mothers pointing out here, it is the true parents, the true mother, and the only begotten daughter who can give rebirth to fallen people. So mother's emphasizing, even within the realm of true parents, mother is emphasizing the role of women, especially the role of true mother, especially as God's only begotten daughter. Next year, we will dedicate the Chon-il Sanctum, the Chonwon-gung and the Chon-il Sanctum, the heavenly abode of Heavenly Parent, where we will be able to attend Heavenly Parent. Then, indeed, the substantial environment that Heavenly Parent has desired, dreamed of, and waited for over 6,000 years will finally emerge. The issue, however, is that those on the Korean Peninsula, especially everyone in South Korea, need to be engrafted as the people of Heavenly Parent. You, the members of the Women's Federation, have a critical role to play in this task. You must educate those around you, your region, tribe, and your nation with a motherly heart and give them new life. This is so that through the true parents, they can receive Heavenly Parent's blessing and rise to the position of God's true children. So, again, Mother is beckoning us, all of us, especially the women. I mean, she's speaking to women at the Women's Federation event. There's a small section of men because there's all the leaders there. But Mother is really especially asking women to take a leading role and all of us to understand the nuance of the motherly way. And to especially bless everyone in your region, your nation, your tribe, and especially those in South Korea. There is nothing to impede us. We are confident. We have nothing to fear. Why do you hesitate? I have said on several occasions that if you walk in unity with me, miracles will happen. Do you believe this? Through your accomplishments as Women's Federation members, your husbands will also win great medals. There you go, brothers. That is killing two birds with one stone. Will you do it? I pray you will all become members of the Women's Federation that are qualified to establish heaven's traditions, educate others, and help them to be reborn as God's true sons and daughters. I believe in all of you. Let us do our very best. So, listening to Mother speak, I mean, that day, Mother was beautiful. She was radiant. She was confident. She was speaking straight. It was such an impactful speech. I encourage you to watch it in its entirety on maybe Peace TV and delivered by Mother directly. I just wanted to read it together with you and pull out just a few of the things that lift off of the page. For me, there's a lot more in there, but I encourage you to watch it, read it, pray about it, reflect upon it. But through all of the things Mother's been saying for 10 years, especially the last few years, and certainly throughout our recent trip to Korea, I feel like Mother is chipping away, kind of getting underneath, consistently getting underneath something and trying to help us understand that there is uniqueness in Mother's role, in true Mother's role, in the role of the only begotten daughter. So, we have true parents, and honestly, many times we kind of look at true parents as just sort of true father with Mother on the side. And maybe over the last 10 years, we've gotten better to understand true Mother's, equal status or something like this as true Mother. But it's not about equality. There's a role that the husband plays, there's a role that the wife plays. There's a role that men play, there's a role that women play. There's a role that God's only begotten son plays, and there's a role that God's only begotten daughter plays. And also, there is a role that the second coming plays, and there is a role that the first coming plays. And in all of these things, Mother is hinting at, or not really hinting, but she is kind of consistently driving at a deeper awareness of God's providence, of human history, of providential history, and specifically for us to understand the meaning of Mother's unique role as the first coming of God's only begotten daughter. There's so much in there. So much in there. I encourage you to search back to one of my earlier messages in the Mother of Peace series. It's the title message in chapter 3. I came into this world as God's only begotten daughter. Because I just open up a few of my own thoughts on the matter there, but there's many more that I wish to share. It's not just about equality between father and mother. We did not understand what the meaning of Mother's role 60 years ago. We did not understand the meaning of God's only begotten daughter. Even if Father mentioned it, it was coming in one ear and out the other. We did not understand the specific value, purpose, and meaning of God's only begotten daughter 60 years ago. And we still do not today. So, Mother was mentioning that if we had understood over 60 years ago, then the last 60 years would have been entirely different. But that now we are returning to a point in time when we can again understand. And that's what we've got to do. But if we don't, no amount of teaching, no amount of declaring, no amount of service projects are going to change anything in the world unless we go back to that point of understanding what we failed to understand over 60 years ago. Understand it now, pray about it now, study about it now. Then we will be able to not just continue doing what we were doing before, but to confidently, in total unity with our true Mother, let the miracles unfold. Let us teach with confidence in that heavenly Mother way, of that invitational way. Let the people know the truth about Heavenly Parent, and let us attend Heavenly Parent. Mother's creating the environment for it to be easier and easier to do so. So, brothers and sisters, and especially our sisters, our wives, daughters, and mothers, God bless you. Thank you for your incredible patience throughout human history, this male-dominated history marked by war and conflict, fighting between the brothers. Well, the brothers are fighting because we're insecure. We're insecure because we didn't really receive true Mother's love. So, because of that, we put on airs, we make ourselves seem bigger than we really are, and we're constantly threatened by the next man because of that insecurity that has eaten away at our confidence for 6,000 years. But to be a truly confident man, husband, son, brother, we must understand also the meaning of God's only begotten daughter and taste the loving embrace of our true Mother. Personally, that's my rebirth experience, and it's a constant one. I'm still growing into it, right? But that's honestly my experience, like rebirth, again and again. The deeper I go in understanding the unique beauty and value of my true Mother's love. So, I hope you enjoyed the message. Until next time, God bless you. Have a great day, a great week. God bless you and your families. Adieu.